Believe Brett Baer when he says it. Breaking news tonight on the deadly mass shooting at the supermarket in Boulder, Colorado. We're learning more about the suspect who opened up fire, murdering 10 people, including a police officer. Police identified the shooter as a 21-year-old Ahmad Al-Alawi Alissa from a Denver suburb. They say he used an assault rifle and is now charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder. The motive? Still unclear. And less than 24 hours after the shooting, President Biden calling on Congress to pass an assault weapons ban. He's also urging the Senate to pass 2 House bills on background checks.
We can ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines in this country once again.
Senator John Kennedy joins us to respond in just a moment. But first, we go to Fox Chief Breaking News correspondent Trace Gallagher for all the latest developments. Trace.
Hi, Brian. The 21-year-old suspect is Ahmed Al-Alawi Alissa, born in Syria, moved to the U.S. when he was 3 and lives with his parents, siblings, and other relatives in a Boulder suburb. His sister called him quiet and nice. His brother called him deeply disturbed, antisocial, and paranoid. And according to social media posts, the suspect did believe that people were following him and that his former high school had hacked into his cell phone, possibly for Islamophobic reasons. He also posted about Islamic prayers and holidays and how he deeply disliked the former president for his response to immigration and refugees, allegedly writing, quote, "Trump is such a D word." The suspect also had a few run-ins with the law, including in high school when he snuck up and punched a classmate for no apparent reason and was sentenced to probation and community service. Other classmates say Alawi Alissa was short-tempered, violent, saying he once lost a wrestling match and threatened to, quote, "kill everybody." One student said Alawi Alissa was concerned about being targeted for his religion and told the Denver Post, quoting here, he would talk about him being Muslim and how if anybody tried anything, he would file a hate crime and say they were making it up. The weapon in the mass shooting was reportedly bought by the suspect last week. Brian.
A lot of questions still, Trace, but appreciate it. That's the update. Meanwhile, joining us right now, Republican Senator John Kennedy. Senator, we gave you a lot of information. There's still a lot we don't know, but one thing is predictable. The gun debate is back.
Well, Brian, look, these killings were terrible. They were horrible. I'm reminded, though, that, America is a big country. We're free. And one of the prices we pay for that freedom is that you're always going to have some people who abuse it. Freedom is risk. What we've got to concentrate on is how to control that risk. You're not going to stop the killings until you stop the killers. But you don't stop drunk drivers by getting rid of all sober drivers, which is what many of my Democratic friends want to do with respect to the Second Amendment. In my judgment, we do not need more gun control. We need more idiot control. How do we do that? We've already tried. The Republicans have. Senator Grassley, Senator Cruz had a bill to strengthen our national database. We regulate gun ownership in America. If you're convicted of certain crimes, if you have a tendency to violence, if you're mentally ill and you want to buy a gun, your name has to run through a database. The problem is that the database has huge holes in it, and many federal agencies and state agencies are very cavalier about sending in the names. Grassley and Cruz's bill, which I support, would have tightened up the database, and it would have cracked down on people who have guns who shouldn't have guns. You know why the bill didn't pass? Many of my Democratic colleagues filibustered it. Now, if you drill down far enough, what you're going to find, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but many, not all, many of my Democratic colleagues, they just don't believe in the Second Amendment. They just don't.
Right.
I mean, we've heard it in terms of police officers. I mean, basically, the Democratic position is that if a bad guy shoots a cop, it's the gun's problem. If a cop shoots a bad guy, it's the cop's fault.
I hear you.
If it weren't for double standards here, we wouldn't have any standards at all.
Here's what the president said today, calling on, he wants this to happen right away in the House and the Senate. Listen.
The United States Senate, I hope some are listening, should immediately pass the 2 House-passed bills that close loopholes in the background check system. We should also ban assault weapons in the process.
It looks like this guy bought his gun 6 days ago. Is there anything about these 2 gun control measures that are now the Senate's looking at that would address anything to do with what happened here today as we know it?
Yes, and if President Biden or whoever's making the decisions at the White House really wants to do something about this problem, they will support Senator Grassley's and Senator Cruz's bill. Let me say it again. We already regulate guns in America.
Right.
The database has holes in it big enough to drive a Mack truck through. Why wasn't the killer in Boulder's name in the database? Let's find out. Let's plug the holes and enforce the law.
Molly Hemingway said something pretty intriguing at the end of Brett Baer's show, saying we might find out that the FBI was tracking him. So we do have a lot of questions that need to be answered. I want to put up a couple of full screens. There's some staggering numbers of gun violence in inner city where the gun controls are very, very strict, especially the one I'm in. Take a look at some of these numbers in terms of shooting. They're pretty stark. I mean, in Chicago, 112 homicides so far this year, 506 shooting incidents so far this year. In Los Angeles, 77 homicides since up until March 13th, 303 shootings as well. In New York City, 68 homicides, 227 shooting victims. People are upset about law enforcement there. Gun controls have never been stricter here. We got a huge problem in our inner cities. Where's the outrage then?
Well, look, I don't want to, again, paint with too broad a brush, Brian, but this is not just about databases and checks for guns and that sort of thing. This is about the Second Amendment. Many of my Democratic colleagues just don't support it. You know, when a jihadist who happens to be a Muslim blows up a school full of school children and kills them all, we're told, don't judge all Muslims because of the acts of a few. And I agree with that. How come the same rule doesn't apply to the 100 million gun owners in America who never abused their right?
So I want you to see what former President Obama rang in with today, who's evidently in constant contact with the current President of the United States. I wonder if this is President Obama's 3rd term. But among the things that he has said, and I'll read it, and it's kind of calling you out. At the end of this, he says, it will take time to root out the disaffection, racism, misogyny that fuels so many of these senseless acts of violence. Okay, but we can make it harder for those with hate in their hearts to buy weapons of war. And he goes on. We can overcome opposition by cowardly politicians and the pressure of a gun lobby that opposes any limit on the ability for anyone to assemble an arsenal. We can and we must. Are you a cowardly politician?
Well, the president a former president is entitled to his opinion. This is America. I'm just telling him that we already, and to me this is a natural fact, we already regulate guns in America. We have the laws. We're just not enforcing them. We need to enforce them. If you pass the Grassley and Cruz bill and he would tell his Democratic friends not to filibuster it to death, then we could do something about this problem.
Senator Kennedy, as we speak right now, our border is being simply invaded by what looks like 3 predominant Central American countries. Even some OT from Mexicans are coming through our border at a dizzying rate. We couldn't get some pictures inside the facility, but finally, it looks like after the embarrassment of the weekend of their Homeland Security Secretary just pretending as if they're worried about the journalists getting or giving the coronavirus to would-be illegal immigrants, they provided some footage of what's going on in these soft facilities where a lot of these underage minors are, unaccompanied minors are. What is your take about what you're seeing, and along with the Axios pictures given to us by Congressman Henry Cuellar?
Well, for the last 4 years, I've listened to many of my Democratic friends and Mr. Biden, he wasn't president then, call all of us who believed in a secure border a bunch of racists. But we pressed on anyway. And when President Biden became President Biden, he inherited the most secure border in my lifetime as a result of the actions of a Republican Congress.
I hate to tell you, they don't believe that. They said Trump left them a mess.
Well, they're wrong. You know, one of us is right and the other is wrong and the other one is them. They inherited the most secure border in my lifetime. So what did President Biden do on his very first day? He got rid of all the policy and practices that we implemented to secure the border. Now, one need not be clairvoyant to see what was going to happen. People flooded in. Now, the people making these decisions in the White House, either one or two things are true. Either they're like a rock, only dumber, and never saw this coming, and I don't believe that, or they knew it was going to happen and they're okay with it. What they're upset about, what they're really upset about, is they thought they would get a free pass from many members of the Democratic media, and they haven't.
They haven't.
They've been caught.
Absolutely. And Senator,
they believe in open borders.
And no offense, Senator, I don't want them shooting my footage. We can do it ourselves. I'd rather them not edit our footage either. We could do that ourselves. We're fully staffed.
It would be a lot more intellectually honest.
Continues to be waged in districts across the country, believe it or not. But thankfully, millions of children are heading back to the classroom. High schoolers in New York City, for example, where we're coming from, have returned to school yesterday. It's been long overdue. We've known for months that school's been among the safest places for kids to go, and the kids want to be back in school. Listen.
You're alone by yourself and you don't really have anyone to talk to or be around, and so it gets really lonely.
What I would do is rather come here because in person it's much easier.
I just wanted to focus again like I used to.
The effects of keeping them out of school have hurt our kids immeasurably. Like we said last night, you got suicide attempts up, overdoses skyrocketing under COVID lockdowns. And it's not just impacting families' mental health, it's hurting them financially. Talk about stability. Nearly 3 million moms dropped out of the workforce. Do you believe that? And a recent analysis found that the lost educational year could cost students between 6 and 9% of their income over the course of their careers. Given all that, you would think that teachers' unions would do everything in their power to get back in the classrooms and make up for lost time. You would think they'd follow the science and CDC guidance. You'd be wrong, because on Friday, the CDC issued new guidelines for physical distancing in the classroom, changing the suggested spacing from 6 feet between students to 3 feet. This is great news. But the American Federation of Teachers saw it differently. They don't like the changes one bit. Here's a line from their lengthy statement. You ready? Even with the significant investment of American Rescue Plan money, like $284 billion, by the way, districts lack the human resources and institutional planning ability to make changes quickly. Is this something that could be implemented in the fall or perhaps the summer? Really? You hear that? It sounds like the teachers union are positioning themselves to grab some more money to distance desks from 6 feet to 3 feet. We don't know how to teach kids if they're 3 feet apart. But if you throw a couple of bucks my way, maybe we could start doing some talking. 3 different COVID packages have allocated just about $300 billion for schools alone in March 2020. How much money is enough for unions to be happy? We may never find out. Joining us now to make sense of it all, we believe, is Fox News senior political analyst Brit Hume. Brit, you've been all over this. This is driving you crazy. Have you seen it with your grandkids?
Yes, I have. My granddaughters are both in college, and they've been doing distance learning for part of each of the past 2 terms, and neither of them likes it, and has found it useful. It's very hard for the kids to learn that way, and all the testing that we've seen that gives a sense of how well kids are learning tells us that they're not learning nearly well enough in this way. Their educations have all been badly damaged. Their commencement exercises have been canceled or cut down. All of that, all of their whole high school experience has been damaged just for those kids, and college experience as well.
You know, Britt, if we're bombing Iraq and you're going to school in Baghdad, school's going to be disrupted. And when the pandemic first hit, schools are going to be disrupted. But once some of the private schools and public schools started going back and pulling it off successfully, that should have led everyone to understand that you can do this. But yet, when the guidelines changed, this is part of that statement they released, the teachers union, weakening one layer and layering mitigation demands that the other layers must be strengthened. We strongly urge you in any discussion of this shift to forcefully insist on strict and strengthening adherence to other mitigation strategies. So they're saying is, if you're going to close in the desks, make the air better. I don't get what they're getting at. What do they want?
Well, the problem, of course, Brian, is we've known virtually from there are a lot of things that we thought we knew that turned out to be wrong from the beginning. But there are a couple of things we've known all along, one of which is that school kids are almost totally invulnerable to this disease. And we've known as well that they're not much spreaders of it. So the rationale for keeping schools closed has never made any sense to start with. And now, at this stage, with cases declining, and we know more and more now about how safely kids can be in schools and how close they can sit together and all the rest of it, it makes no sense whatsoever. And I don't see how parents can escape the conclusion that what these teachers' unions are doing now is trying to continue a situation where these teachers don't have to work and are getting paid. It's a pretty good deal for them if you think of it, but it's a terrible deal for kids.
See, I'm torn because some of the most dedicated people I know are teachers. They impact all of our lives. You could name your 1st through 8th grade teacher, I'm sure, even today, but yet they're almost being pushed back and told to keep quiet, stay in the corner. We got this by the union. If you're a teacher, what do you do now?
Well, I can't speak for any individual teacher, but I would say you would think there'd be some kind of a mutiny within the union among dedicated teachers who can, they can read the literature, they can follow the science as it is reported. They must know, these teachers, how safe it is for them to be doing their jobs. But we haven't seen that yet, and I suspect it's because they're afraid of the union bosses. That's the only thing that makes any sense to me.
So, Britt, I'd like to bring it up to another area of your expertise as we try to get kids back in school. What about 2024? I thought it's very interesting that former President Trump is doing a lot of interviews now, and he was asked, hey, who are the leading Republicans should you not run, or who are you keeping your eye on? He said there's a lot of talent, but here's the list that he came out with. Here it is: Ron DeSantis, Senator Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, his arch rival for a while. Rand Paul, also his rival for a while. He said keep your eye on Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Kristi Noem. What do you think of that list? Who's missing that belongs on it?
Well, there are a couple of people on that list that I think have shown, genuine promise. I particularly think of Governor DeSantis. I've spent a lot of time in Florida these days, and I've been down here, and we've been able to live pretty much as normal down here compared to other states. And he's been gutsy enough to stand up to the press and to the Democratic critics who have said that he was being reckless. And it turns out that his policies of keeping things as open as possible throughout this past year have not only resulted in better economic results, better educational results, and the rest of that, but in terms of COVID, by and large, the results here have been no worse than some states that had severe lockdowns. So I think his stock would be up among many Republicans across the country. Similarly for Kristi Noem, who's done a good job of keeping her state largely open through most of this, despite fierce criticism from the left. She recently had what I think is a stumble in which she, promised to sign a bill that was to protect women's sports from being participated in by biological men. She promised to sign it, now has changed her mind, and she was on with Tucker on Monday night, and her explanation was incoherent. But the rest of them, I think, are all people who have ambitions to run. Ted Cruz thinks of little else, in my opinion. I'm not sure he's that hot to ticket right now. I'm not so sure why he's on the list, except that he's been a very devoted partner of Donald Trump since 2016. Yeah, it was brought up to me with Governor Christie today on the radio that he also at one point called his wife, President Trump called his wife ugly and said his dad had a role in the Kennedy assassination. But we get over these things. Missing from the list, I thought, Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo. I don't know if maybe the president's a little ticked off that Mike Pompeo's going to Iowa and getting ready. I think Rick Scott, Tim Scott might be in there as well. Britt, well, you got. I was just going to say, with Trump, you always have to figure that it's a lot has to do with how these people have acted toward him. If they're nice to him, he likes it. Right. If they aren't at any particular time, not so much. Right. And the reason why you like me, Britt, because I'm always nice to you. Correct? I appreciate that, Brian. Thank you. Yeah, I'm smart enough to know that. Britt Hume, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. The founder now of DailyMalarkey.com joins us now. Ian, what happened to you in Loudoun County?
So, quick story here. The Daily Wire was working on a story. I found out that through talking to the reporter who reached out to me for comment, that I was on this list that was created by this group, Anti-Racists of Loudoun County, which we now call Chardonnay Antifa. And this list was soliciting people to assist in hacking people's websites, exposing them through mail, and all kinds of other nefarious things, simply for speaking out on critical race theory and for people that spoke out on wanting to open schools. So and then everybody started adding to the list.
So you don't want your kid to grow up apologizing for being male or white. You want them to actually learn math, reading, and writing.
Absolutely. I want them to be critical thinkers. I want them to be independent-minded individuals that are prepared for success in this world. And right now, Loudoun County is, I mean, it is erupting. There was a school board meeting tonight. We had a press conference there where we announced that we're going to start a recall effort for 6 of the members of the school board that were in this group, as well as the county attorney and several other individuals in the Loudoun County administration. And I got to tell you, I was watching the school board proceedings on the way over here, and people are ticked off. They're onto this, and they are not going to let up.
Your Department of Justice background makes you a fighter and makes you experienced to know what your rights are. Many people don't. They get afraid. They get afraid that their kids are going to suffer the consequences. They're going to get kicked out of that public school. They're going to get fired from their job. But you say, take the opposite tact. This is the minority. There's 3 ways to win against this: critical race theory or the next cancel culture activity. Fearlessness, substance, and mockery. Mock them?
Exactly, because you cannot get into debates with these individuals on Facebook, right? You'll spend your whole life there, you know, a keyboard warrior dealing with these people that don't want to hear reason. So you need to be substantive. You need to mock them. You need to laugh at them. And that's one of the things that we've done with the DailyMalarkey.com, is that we have gone after cancel culture. We are going to call it out. And it's ironic that the very people tried to cancel somebody that writes a newsletter that comes out every 4 p.m. every day on cancel culture.
So, you know, a lot of people are saying, finally, someone's on the front foot, not on the back foot, not defending themselves. You're not saying that there was no slavery. You're not saying that we didn't need a civil rights movement in the 60s. You're not saying that there's not race issues to be adjusted. You just don't believe that race is in everything we do.
That's right. Look, I believe that we need to have diverse schools. I believe we need to have diverse workplaces. I believe in a colorblind meritocracy. Let the best person have, let people have equal opportunity, regardless of skin color, regardless of gender, regardless of sexual preference, and then let everybody compete on an equal playing field. What we don't need to do is have policies that make results the same for everybody, regardless of how they perform in a meritocracy.
All right, Ian, this is not over, right?
It is not over. We are just getting started.
All right, DailyMalarkey.com?
That's it, DailyMalarkey.com. Sign up now. We'll be out at 4 o'clock tomorrow.
They picked on the wrong parent. Ian Pryor, thanks so much.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, let's continue this. Despite all the talk of canceling, like you just heard, things like Dr. Seuss and Mr. Potato Head, our next guest says most Americans actually hate woke politics. University of Tennessee law professor Glenn Reynolds writes in the New York Post, I talked to him today on the radio, here's the headline: to defeat woke tyrants, the rest of us must treat them like the monsters they are. Professor Reynolds joins us now. Professor, I guess Ian Pryor's singing your song, right?
Yeah, he's totally on target there. Yeah, I mean, what you have to realize about what's going on is the woke is, as you said, a tiny minority. It's maybe 3 or 4% at most of the population. Everybody hates woke culture. The polls show a vast majority of Americans hate it, a vast majority of blacks hate it, all minorities, liberal comedians hate it, even Barack Obama's spoken out about it, and they still get their way so often because they're just bullies. And they bully people, and they threaten them, and they go after them, and people just want them all to go away, and so they give in, especially the people who run a lot of our institutions, who tend to not have much in the way of a spine. But the fact is, nobody actually likes these people. Nobody agrees with them, and we can't let a minority of bullies take over our culture and terrorize the public.
I hear you saying that.
There's a Cato poll. Yeah, there's a YouGov Cato poll that shows 2/3 of people almost are afraid to speak their politics.
But your university backs you, Glenn Reynolds, and that's good. There's a lot of corporations that don't. A little bit of tension with an employee, we're going to have to make a change. We're going to let you go. For example, if you're a student, you have a high school student at the Dalton School in Manhattan. The Dalton School is a ticket to the Ivy League. They make some woke changes. They kick your kid out. Who's right then? They have the power, correct? How do you get the power back?
Well, you have to take it back. That's how you get power back everywhere and through all time. Yeah, Barry Weiss wrote about that and said a lot of the parents at the Dalton School were too afraid to speak out. They were afraid they'd be mobbed, even though I'll bet there are a majority of the parents there, actually. They're afraid the school controls their kid's shot at Harvard. But, of course, the kid goes to Harvard, it's going to be even worse.
They haven't been in school all year, by the way. They don't go back to school till next fall. Sports have been canceled. Meanwhile, you say they're the intolerant minority, and you believe they can destroy democracy. So this minority has that type of power. So this isn't a matter of making your life better. This is a matter of saving the country.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, Nassim Taleb, in his book Skin in the Game, talks about how an intolerant minority of just 3 to 4% can destroy civilizations and has done so. We have to put that to a stop, and we do it simply by not putting up with it.
So you say this, these people are horrible, awful people. Treat them like that. Deprive them of their moral credibility and self-image. How?
Well, first thing you do is you tell them you're horrible, awful people. They're doing horrible, awful things. They're getting people fired from their jobs. They're taking pleasure in ruining people's lives. They're going after teenagers years before. That's what awful people do. That's not what moral people do. That's not what empathetic people do. That's what awful, hard.
Right. Glenn, have you faced this in your career?
You know, I've had some of it. Honestly, it's been less than you might expect. But I think part of that is because, you know, I generally say what I think. And I think the more you're willing to say what you think, the less people are actually willing to attack you.
Understood. And by the way, that's true. Most people I talk to whisper who they voted for. They don't talk. They never put a bumper sticker on their car. They certainly don't fly a flag from their house. Yet, but they fervently back a candidate. Right? And because they don't want to hear the blowback and they don't want their kids or their relatives to pay the price, or people at their workplace or to suffer in their employment. But you're saying time to stand up. You don't have a choice. Professor Glenn Reynolds, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Boy, my illegal immigrants at the border, not even accused, they are not letting you get access. Finally, today, they're caving to pressure. They're releasing video that they shot of 2 Texas facilities housing migrant children. So how are they really doing when it comes to transparency? And will President Biden actually admit when he's wrong, as he says he is? Joining us now, journalist Glenn Greenwald. Glenn, from what you see, how much are you seeing? Is this a transparent administration?
No, it's not even close. And the irony, of course, Brian, is that the 2 most vocal media complaints during the Trump years were, number one, the refusal to provide transparency. The Washington Post flamboyantly adopted a new motto to reflect its purported concerns: democracy dies in darkness. And then second, the treatment of migrants at the border. That was probably the principal argument for claiming that Trump was essentially a new Hitler. And now you have these 2 problems converging, where the Biden administration is refusing to allow media access, where a Getty photographer said, I never had any problem under the Obama administration or the Trump administration, and now suddenly with Biden administration, we can't get any access to seeing what they're doing to people at the border, the thing we were all supposed to be so deeply concerned about. And they're not allowing us to know who's meeting with people in the White House virtually, which is how people mostly are meeting with people in the White House because of the pandemic. So they put this huge black curtain around what they're doing, and very few people in the media seem particularly concerned about it.
On the immigration, this what blows me away. Like it or not, we knew exactly what was going on with President Trump at the border. It was a problem, it was a mess. But he made adjustment, fired some people, moved some people around, and at the end, they pretty much had it down. The pandemic really made it a no-tolerance policy. When it was all said and done, it started happening again. They would not let cameras in, but the excuse they made, Glenn, must have driven you nuts, even though you're all these miles away. We're worried about the pandemic. They're worried about the reporters going in and giving the illegal immigrants the coronavirus. Please, excuse me. And then when Axios gets the pictures from a Democratic congressman, Henry Cuellar, who's being ignored by the Democratic administration, they have no more excuses.
Well, and the other thing they claimed, Jen Psaki claimed, the reason why they weren't allowed to allow access yet, that didn't even pass the laptop test, was they were concerned for the privacy of migrants. Do you think people who are being maltreated at the border, who are being kept in cages, who have aluminum foil as blankets, who are being kept there way in excess of what the law permits, which is what's happening, are concerned about their privacy? Or do you think they want reporters and they're showing the mistreatment to which they're subjected? But again, there was enormous outrage over what was happening at the border under President Trump. It was commonplace to hear it compared to what was going on in Nazi concentration camps. What they're doing now, which is saying, oh, don't worry, we're going to pick and choose the nice scenes for you and release them, and that will be the transparency, is exactly what kind of propaganda was constantly done in those camps, and you hear very little media outrage. There's some clamoring, but nowhere near the level we heard during the Trump years, where there was a lot more transparency, at least, about what was being done to these immigrants.
It's like if you go to cover a story, they say, here are your sound bites and here's your video. Go put it together. Thanks. I could do it myself. You brought this other point about who's signing the guest book when they go to the White House. Why does that matter?
We need to know who it is who is wielding influence within the White House. The executive branch is incredibly powerful. All that power emanates from the White House. So if lobbyists are meeting with people inside the White House, or if people who wield influence on Wall Street or who are corporate donors are meeting with key White House officials and then policies are being enacted, we absolutely have a right to know who it is who's influencing our government, which is why it's commonplace for that kind of transparency to be offered, to know who it is who's meeting inside the White House. And they won't even provide those kind of logs of who is meeting virtually. So if some chief of staff of President Biden or President Biden himself or Kamala Harris has a meeting with some highly influential people who's shaping U.S. policy, right now we have no way as a journalistic force or as a public to know who it is our government officials are meeting with.
Glenn, are you optimistic there are going to be some tough questions asked at Thursday's first press conference with the President of the United States?
I think there will be some questions about the crisis at the border, because that kind of hypocrisy is too glaring even for them. But when you look at everything that the Biden administration is already doing, things like appealing the prosecution of Julian Assange, who brought more transparency to the U.S. government than anybody else, the record that they're claiming that they will support and the actions that they're pursuing are so wildly disparate that it ought to be a very hostile press conference, and I doubt it will be that.
Glenn, always great to see you. Always great to get your opinions. Thanks so much.
Good to see you, Brian.
All right, 12 minutes out before the top of the hour. Coming up straight ahead, forget tradition, the new VP of the United States not saluting the U.S. military. That's an interesting stance. They're standing at attention. Why is she not saluting? She's taken some that away in a couple of weeks. It's been more than a year since Delta suspended snack service, taking away cookies and giving passengers an airtight bag of pretzels, which we needed our partners to open up with us. We had to grab one side and pull together, and Purell. But starting next month, the little cans of soda are coming back, and if you're good, you get a whole can to yourself, reportedly. Passengers will also be spotted having sweet, salty snacks of their choice while supplies last. Now this. Hall & Oates, Loggins & Messina, Tango & Cash. When it comes to professional relationships, who gets top billing is quite important. Glad the White House has got it down.
A Harris administration together with Joe Biden as the President of the United States.
Harris-Biden administration is going to relaunch that effort. President-elect Harris took hers today for the same reason. When President Harris and I took a virtual tour of a vaccination center in Arizona.
It's a little confusing, right? And now a leaked memo indicates White House communication staffers should reportedly refer to Joe and Kamala as Biden-Harris administration in official public communications instead of Biden administration, has been done in previous White Houses. Fox News has requested comment from the White House about the change, have not heard back. Joining us now is someone who spent time at the White House, George W. Bush's White House, who had a running mate named Dick Cheney, but he was not on all the letterhead. Ari Fleischer now joins us. Ari, there's 15 executive departments. It's all switched now to Biden-Harris. Do you read anything into this?
Well, Walter Cronkite, let me tell you, my take on this is either one of two things. Either Joe Biden is being incredibly gracious and just wants to extend the rubric of the administration to his vice president, or it's a real sign, and it could be both, that Joe Biden is definitely a one-term president. At the age of 82, he has no intention of running for re-election, and he's paving the way now for his preferred candidate to succeed him, Kamala Harris. I strongly suspect it's the latter much more than the former.
Right. Now, something else that's going on, and it might be because the former senator, former attorney general is new to the job, but as you know, the military is escorting in and off military planes. She seems not to be saluting the Marines, the Army, who's ever the military officer there, who's greeting her. Is that a problem?
You know, I think it's a mistake by her. I'm not going to throw the book at her on this. You know, I just think it's one of these things where if you respect the military, if you're aware of who they are, their service to the country, it's just kind of the thing you intrinsically, automatically do when somebody salutes you, you salute back. Now, I will say Ronald Reagan started that tradition. Ronald Reagan was a veteran. He was familiar with being saluted at and saluting back. She's not. And interestingly, Brian, the vice president is not in the military chain of command. So, when somebody salutes the president, that's the chain of command, even though he's not in a uniform.
Gotcha.
Vice president is not even in a uniform and is not in the military chain of command. It's the president to the Secretary of Defense and down from there. But still, the point remains the same. It's just good manners.
Absolutely.
You should respect the military when they salute back.
And I'm also respecting the fact that there's a measure moving through the House and into the Senate now, H.R. 1, that's going to federalize elections. We can get into detail, but it'll change elections, and it will be election day like we've never had before, more like election month. As H.R. 1, we're trying to give the voting to more and more people, according to the Democrats. Isn't it ironic they're trying to take a House seat away in Iowa, and even two Democrats think this is out of bounds? Ironic?
Yeah, what's happening in Iowa is an absolute power grab, and everybody should be alarmed about what Nancy Pelosi is trying to engineer. Look, this is nothing at all like what happened on January 6th. On January 6th, some Republicans, not all, some Republicans voted to disallow the election of Biden. It would not have resulted in putting in Donald Trump. It just would have sowed confusion. Here, this is an internal coup. What they're trying to do is throw out the incumbent Republican and replace her with a different Democrat. That is a total difference from January 6th. And it's an abuse of power. If the House goes through with this, I think there's going to be hell to pay. There's going to be such a rebellion going on in the House. And if I'm Kevin McCarthy, whoever wins by the narrowest margin by the Democrats when he's Speaker, you go to that same committee and you throw them out of the House. Yeah. This is not the way we should be doing business. I hope it's a warning to Nancy Pelosi. You do not want to go down that road.
Marionette Miller Meeks won the election. She got sworn in. She's sitting. Rita Hart, they say, well, she wants an election. She didn't go to Iowa. She's actually going to the federal government to get her seat back. And even Democrats are upset by it. And I remember this happened. Something similar happened in the 80s with Newt Gingrich when he was a minority member, and it helped him become Speaker of the House. Ari, it's just unbelievable what's happening now. Do you expect H.R. 1 to actually get green-lighted in a simple majority?
I can't see it passing in the Senate. It's public financing in campaigns, which taxpayers have always objected to. Why should my money go to pay for Nancy Pelosi? Why should Democrat money go to pay for Marjorie Taylor Greene? You got it. I don't think it'll pass the Senate.
He is Ari Fleischer. Thanks so much, Ari. I appreciate you closing the show with me.
Thank you, Walter.
You've been watching Fox News Primetime. I'm Brian Kilmeade. Make sure to listen to the radio show tomorrow between 9 and noon and be back here tomorrow night at 7. Tucker Carlson is